The translator chip in my skull crackled as the Zerathi Queen's bodyguard slammed me against the crystalline wall. My hand, still warm from where her 6 slender fingers had wrapped around mine, throbbed as blood dripped from my knuckles onto the pristine floor. The throne room fell silent, except for the hum of energy shields powering up around us. "He touched the matriarch!" the guard hissed, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled rage. I hadn't meant to. The Queen had extended her hand during the diplomatic reception, and every human instinct screamed at me to respond in kind. A simple handshake, except the Zerathi didn't shake hands. They never touched outsiders, and I just committed what their culture considered either a marriage proposal or a declaration of war. Queen Thessera rose from her throne, her iridescent scales catching the light of 3 suns filtering through the dome above. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her crown of living metal pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that I couldn't read. Every diplomat in the hall held their breath. The peace treaty between humanity and the Zerathi Empire, forged over 5 years of careful negotiation, hung by a thread. "Release him," she said. The guard's grip tightened. "Matriarch, protocol demands." I said, "Release him." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had ruled for 3 centuries. The guard obeyed, stepping back, but keeping his weapon trained on my chest. I straightened my jacket, trying to ignore the pain shooting through my ribs. Ambassador Chen would have my head for this. Earth's entire delegation had spent 6 months learning Zarathi customs, and I'd destroyed everything in 3 seconds of cultural ignorance. The Queen descended the dais steps, each footfall echoing like a countdown. Her entourage parted, no one spoke. In Zerathi culture, physical contact between non-family members occurred only in 2 contexts: combat or courtship. By accepting her extended hand, I'd answered a question I didn't know she'd asked. She stopped 3 feet away, studying me with eyes that held intelligence older than human civilization. "You are Marcus Webb, Junior Cultural Liaison. 27 standard years old. You joined the Diplomatic Corps after the Battle of Proxima Station, where you lost your brother." "Yes, Your Majesty." My voice came out steady despite my hammering heart. "And you know what you have done?" "I've offended your customs." "I apologize. I apologize mean nothing." She glanced at her high priestess, an ancient Zerathi whose scales had faded to silver. The priestess's expression remained unreadable. "Among my people, to accept an offered hand is to accept a bond. To refuse would have been grave insult. But to accept without understanding the question is to answer in ignorance." The translator chip struggled with her next words, filling my head with concepts that had no human equivalent. Bonding, soul-threading, the intertwining of royal bloodlines with foreign houses to prevent war. "I asked if you would stand beside me," she continued, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. "If you would help bridge the chasm between our species. If you would marry me, Marcus Webb, and become king consort of the Zarathi Empire." The throne room erupted. Zerathi nobles clicked and hissed. Human diplomats shouted. Ambassador Chen looked ready to pass out. The guard beside me raised his weapon higher, clearly hoping for an excuse to fire. I should have said no. Should have explained the mistake, begged for mercy, let the diplomats clean up my mess. But I'd spent 3 years studying the Zarathi. I'd learned their language, their history, their endless wars with the neighboring Kryn collective. I knew that this empire of 1,000 worlds teetered on the edge of chaos, that their warrior culture respected only strength, that their queen had ruled alone for too long and her nobles sensed weakness. And I knew that humanity needed this alliance. The Kryn had destroyed 12 of our colonies. Without Zerathi military support, Earth itself would fall within a decade. "I accept," I said. Someone dropped something that shattered like ice. Queen Thessera's expression didn't change, but her scales shifted color, from deep violet to something lighter, touched with gold. "You understand what this means? You will leave your people, learn our ways, submit to our laws, face challenges from those who believe humans are beneath us." "I understand." "Well, you will be tested. My nobles will demand proof that you are worthy. Some will try to kill you." "I'm still here." The faintest hint of something like approval flickered across her face. She turned to the High Priestess. "Begin the preparations. We bond at moonrise." "As you command, Matriarch. But the trials will proceed as tradition demands." The Queen looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something other than regal composure in her eyes. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. "If he survives them, he will have earned his place. If not, we will honor his sacrifice and seek another path to peace." Ambassador Chen found his voice. Your Majesty, surely we can discuss this. Marcus is hardly qualified. He answered the question. The bond is spoken. Only death or the trials can break it now. She extended her hand again, this time deliberately, letting me see the subtle bioluminescence patterns on her palm that signified a formal proposal. Come, future king, we have much to discuss before you face the proving fire. Her skin felt like warm silk over steel. The energy that passed between us made my translator chip short out for 3 seconds, filling my head with images I couldn't process. Memories, emotions, the weight of an empire pressing down on both of us. The Zarathi guards formed up around us as she led me from the throne room. Behind us, the human delegation descended into chaos. Ahead, through the crystalline corridors of a palace that had stood for 5,000 years, lay a future I couldn't imagine. I'd come to this world to help forge peace through careful words and cultural understanding. Instead, I'd become part of the treaty itself, the first human to marry into Zarathi royalty, the first outsider to claim the title of king consort in their recorded history. And, according to the warrior culture I'd studied so carefully, I had 72 hours to prove I deserved to survive the honor. The queen's grip on my hand tightened as we walked, her scales shifting through colors I was only beginning to understand. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The entire galaxy would be watching what happened next, and failure meant more than my death. It meant war. I'd held an alien woman's hand. She'd asked if I would marry her. I'd said yes. Now I had to find a way to live long enough to keep that promise, and somehow bridge a gap between species that had barely tolerated each other for half a decade. No pressure. The palace guard sealed the doors behind us with a sound like thunder. Somewhere in the depths of the building, preparation drums began to beat. The trials were coming, and I had no idea what they would demand. But I'd given my word to a queen who had gambled her throne on a human stranger's integrity. I wouldn't let her down. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with statues of past king consorts who had died proving themselves worthy. I counted 14 sculptures before the queen pulled me into a private chamber where sunlight painted rainbow patterns across the walls. She released my hand and turned to face me fully, her expression unreadable. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said quietly. Probably both, Your Majesty. For the first time since we'd met, Queen Thesara smiled. It was a small thing, barely a softening around her eyes, but it transformed her from an untouchable monarch into someone who carried the same weight I did, someone who had gambled everything on a moment of connection. Call me Thesara, she said. If you are to be my husband, we should at least use names. She moved to the window, gazing out at the sprawling capital city below. I did not offer my hand lightly, Marcus Webb. I have ruled alone for 3 centuries because none of my people were strong enough to stand beside me. But our empire fractures. The nobles grow bold. The Kryn press our borders. I needed something they would not expect. Someone who would force them to reconsider their certainty. A human. A bridge. She glanced back at me. If you survive the trials, you will prove that strength comes in forms beyond physical power, that an outsider can master our ways, that the alliance between our peoples is not merely political convenience, but something deeper. Her scales darkened, and if you fail, you will at least die with honor, which is more than most humans achieve in our eyes. Comforting. I offered truth. She crossed the room to stand before me again, close enough that I could see the intricate patterns etched into her scales, the evidence of countless battles survived. The first trial begins tonight. The proving fire will test your courage. Tomorrow, the trial of wisdom will measure your mind. The day after, the trial of strength will show whether your body can endure what our culture demands. 3 trials, 3 chances to withdraw. 3 opportunities for death, and if I pass, then we bond before the Empire, and you become king consort. You will share my throne, my power, and my enemies. Her eyes held mine. You will also share my burdens, the weight of 1,000 worlds, the responsibility for billions of lives, the knowledge that every decision we make could mean survival or extinction for our people. She paused. Are you truly prepared for this? I thought of my brother dying at Proxima Station, his ship torn apart by Kryn weapons while Earth's fleet watched helplessly from too far away. I thought of the colonies we'd lost, the billions who would die if the war continued. I thought of the chance standing before me. Slim, terrifying, and absolutely necessary. No, I said honestly. But I'm here anyway. Thesara's smile returned, wider this time. Good. Certainty is the province of fools. Doubt keeps us sharp. She moved to a cabinet and withdrew something that gleamed like mercury but felt solid when she pressed it into my hands. This is a combat blade. Traditional design forged in the heart of our oldest star. You will need it for the proving fire. The trial masters will explain the rest. The blade hummed in my grip, responding to my body heat. It was beautiful and deadly, its edge sharp enough to slice through bone. I'd trained in knife combat during my military service, but I had a feeling Zarathi trials would make human training look like a children's game. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. She walked to the door, then hesitated. Marcus Webb, I chose you because something in your eyes when we first met reminded me that hope still exists, that perhaps our species can find common ground despite our differences. Do not make me regret that choice. I'll do my best. The nobles who oppose this union have already selected their champion for the strength trial. He has killed 47 opponents in formal combat. He will not hold back simply because you are human. Her scales shifted to deep crimson. Sleep while you can. Eat. Prepare. When the trial drums sound at dusk, you will enter the proving fire arena, and there will be no mercy, no second chances, and no way out, except victory or death. She left, her guards falling into formation around her. The door sealed behind them with a hiss of compressed air, leaving me alone in a room filled with alien sunlight and the weight of impossible expectations. I looked at the blade in my hands, at my reflection distorted in its surface, 27 years old. Junior cultural liaison. Accidental fiancé to an alien queen. Humanity's unwitting representative in trials designed to kill the unprepared. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Maybe I was too far past fear to feel it anymore. Or maybe some part of me had been preparing for this moment since the day I watched my brother's ship explode, since the day I swore I'd find a way to end the killing. This wasn't the path I'd imagined, but it was the one in front of me, and I'd be damned if I'd turn away now. I practiced with the blade until the light changed, running through combat forms my instructors had drilled into me during basic training. The weapon felt good in my hand, balanced and responsive. It wouldn't save me if I faced someone with centuries of experience, but it might buy me a few extra seconds. In a trial designed to test courage, seconds could mean the difference between proving myself and dying on alien sand. The drums began at dusk, deep and resonant, shaking the palace walls. I straightened my uniform, checked the blade's grip one final time, and stepped into the corridor where Zarathi guards waited to escort me to whatever fresh hell awaited. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me beyond gestures indicating which direction to walk. Their scales had shifted to combat colors, blacks and deep reds that spoke of bloodshed and ancient tradition. The arena occupied the heart of the palace complex, a massive circular space carved from living stone. Thousands of Zarathi filled the stands, their combined voices creating a sound like distant thunder. At the center of the arena, a pit 20 meters across glowed with blue fire that didn't smoke, didn't spread, just burned with steady intensity that hurt to look at directly. Queen Thesera sat on a raised platform, flanked by her high priestess and the noble council. She wore ceremonial armor now, scales polished to mirror brightness, crown blazing with light. When our eyes met across the distance, she gave the slightest nod. No encouragement, no comfort, just acknowledgement that the moment had arrived. The high priestess rose, her voice amplified by technology or magic or something in between. The proving fire tests the courage of Marcus Webb, human who would claim the title of king consort. Let him demonstrate worthiness or let him fall. The trial begins when he enters the flame. It ends when he emerges, or when death claims him. There are no other outcomes. The fire does not discriminate. It reveals truth. A guard removed my jacket, leaving me in a thin shirt that would offer no protection. They guided me to the edge of the pit, where heat radiated in waves that made breathing difficult. The blue flames danced and twisted, forming patterns that almost looked like faces, like screaming mouths, like the shape of every fear I'd ever denied. The proving fire burns away deception, the high priestess continued. It shows what lies beneath. If your courage is true, you will walk through flame unharmed. If doubt lives in your heart, if your commitment wavers, the fire will consume you. There is no trick, no protection, only truth. Somewhere in my head, the rational part of my mind screamed that this was impossible, that fire was fire and I would burn. But I'd seen too much in my years among the stars to dismiss alien technology or cultural practices I didn't understand. The Zarathi had mastered sciences humanity was only beginning to grasp. If they said their fire could read hearts, I had to believe them, or at least believe enough to step forward. The crowd fell silent. Even the drums stopped. In that moment, the entire empire held its breath, waiting to see if a human could pass the first trial, if the bridge between species was real or just another diplomatic fantasy doomed to collapse. I thought of Thessara's hand in mine, the warmth of it, the hope in her eyes despite centuries of ruling alone. I thought of my brother's last transmission, his voice crackling through static as his ship died. Make it mean something, Marcus. Make sure they didn't win. I stepped into the fire. Heat engulfed me instantly, but it didn't burn. The flames wrapped around my body like liquid silk, pressing against my skin, seeking entry, searching for the truth the High Priestess promised they would find. Images flooded my mind, memories I'd buried, fears I'd never spoken aloud, doubts about my worthiness, my strength, my ability to be anything more than a junior liaison who'd stumbled into something beyond his understanding. It showed me Earth burning while I stood powerless. It showed me Thessara's disappointment when I inevitably failed, when the nobility tore me apart and used my corpse as proof that humans were beneath them. It showed me every possible future where my courage cracked and everything fell apart. And then it showed me something else. The moment in the throne room when I'd made the choice. Not the mistake of touching her hand, but the conscious decision to accept the consequences. To say yes when no would have been easier. To walk forward when survival meant retreat. That moment crystallized in the fire, and I understood. The proving fire didn't care about physical courage. It cared about commitment, about the willingness to face impossible odds for something larger than yourself, about choosing truth over comfort, duty over safety, connection over isolation. I walked deeper into the flames, letting them read every corner of my soul, let them see my doubts, my fears, my absolute certainty that I was probably going to die in the next 2 days, and let them see that I was doing it anyway, that I'd chosen this path knowing the cost. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. The fire blazed brighter, climbing toward the ceiling, turning the entire arena into a pillar of blue light. The Zarathi in the stands surged to their feet. I heard Thessara's voice cutting through the roar, shouting something in her native tongue that the translator chip rendered as, "He burns true!" And then I was through. The flames fell away, leaving me standing on the far side of the pit, my clothes unsinged, my skin unmarked. The fire had touched every part of me and found exactly what it sought. Someone too stubborn or too committed or too damn foolish to let impossible odds dictate his choices. The arena erupted in sound. Not cheers exactly, but the Zarathi equivalent, a rhythmic clicking of mandibles that started with a few and spread through the crowd like a wave. Recognition. Respect. The acknowledgement that I'd passed the first test. Thessara rose from her throne, her scales blazing gold in the arena lights. She descended to meet me as guards opened the gates, her expression carefully neutral but something fierce and proud burning in her eyes. "You walked the fire," she said, loud enough for the nobles to hear. "I did. Tomorrow brings the trial of wisdom. Rest while you can." She lowered her voice to something meant only for me. "They expected you to hesitate, to burn, to prove that humans are weak. Instead, you walk through flame without flinching. The nobles are reconsidering their certainty. That makes you dangerous. Watch your back tonight. Will they try to kill me before the trials end? Some would consider it mercy." She touched my shoulder briefly, a gesture that sent the crowd into fresh clicking approval. "But I will post guards. You are under my protection now. Anyone who harms you answers to me." She turned and swept back to her throne, leaving me standing in the center of the arena while the crowd continued their approval. The guards formed up around me again, escorting me through corridors that twisted deeper into the palace complex. They brought me to a suite of rooms that had probably housed dozens of king consorts throughout history, each one commemorated by a plaque on the wall listing their name and how they died in service to the throne. I counted 37 plaques. 15 had died in battle. 8 in assassination, 4 in trials. The rest listed causes I didn't recognize. Neural cascade, genetic rejection, void collapse. Comforting reading for someone about to undergo 2 more trials designed to test limits I wasn't sure I possessed. Food arrived, brought by servants who wouldn't meet my eyes. I ate without tasting it, forcing fuel into a body that would need every advantage tomorrow. The trial of wisdom. Thessara hadn't explained what that meant, but I'd studied enough Zarathi culture to make educated guesses. They valued strategic thinking, the ability to see patterns others missed, the capacity to make impossible choices under pressure. Whatever test they'd designed, it would push me past comfortable certainty into the gray spaces where right and wrong blurred together, and I'd have to navigate it knowing that failure meant death, and success meant one step closer to a throne I had no business approaching. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blue fire, felt it searching through my soul, remembered the weight of an empire's judgment pressing down on me. So I studied instead, reviewing everything I knew about Zarathi philosophy, their ethical frameworks, their approach to leadership and sacrifice. Hours passed. The palace settled into night cycle quiet, broken only by the guards outside my door and the distant hum of the city beyond. I was reviewing strategic theory when something scraped against the window. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but wrong enough to trigger instincts honed by military training. I grabbed the combat blade Thesara had given me and moved to the wall beside the window. The scraping came again, followed by the faint hiss of a cutting tool eating through reinforced crystal. Someone was coming through the window, despite the Queen's protection, despite the guards outside my door. The nobles hadn't waited for the trials to finish. They'd decided to solve their problem tonight. The window shattered inward in a spray of fragments that caught the dim light like stars. 3 figures dropped through, moving with the fluid grace of trained assassins. Their scales were matte black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Professional killers, not hot-headed warriors trying to make a statement. They spread out, cutting off escape routes, their movements coordinated through silent communication I couldn't intercept. The lead assassin carried a blade similar to mine, but longer, its edge flickering with energy that would cut through bone and armor equally well. "We offer mercy," the assassin said, his voice synthesized to remove identifying markers. "Withdrawal from the trials. Return to your people. Live. The alternative is to die here, quietly, and be mourned as a tragic accident. Choose quickly. And if I refuse, then we are authorized to make the problem disappear." He shifted his grip on the weapon. "Nothing personal, human. But you threaten the natural order. The throne is not meant for outsiders. Better you die honorably now than fail the trials publicly and humiliate the queen who chose you. Free against one. Professional killers against a junior liaison with military training. In a room with no exit except the door they blocked. My combat blade felt inadequate against their superior reach and numbers, but I'd walked through fire a few hours ago. I'd faced down my deepest fears and come through intact. These assassins were just another test, another chance to prove that sometimes choosing the harder path was the only path worth taking. "Tell whoever sent you that I'm not withdrawing," I said, settling into a combat stance my instructors had drilled into me until it became muscle memory. "If they want me gone, they'll have to kill me themselves." The lead assassin's scales flickered with something that might have been respect. "As you wish. We will make it quick." They moved as one, a coordinated strike designed to overwhelm me before I could react. But I'd spent 3 years studying Zarathi combat philosophy, learning how their warriors thought and moved. I knew they favored direct attacks, believing that honor demanded facing your enemy head-on. That cultural blind spot gave me the split second I needed. I didn't meet their charge. Instead, I rolled under the lead assassin's blade, using my smaller size and lower center of gravity to slip past his guard. My blade found the weak point where his armor joined at the shoulder joint, a target I'd memorized from cultural studies, never thinking I'd use the knowledge in actual combat. The weapon bit deep. The assassin hissed in pain and stumbled. The other 2 adjusted instantly, separating to attack from different angles. No more assumptions about human weakness. No more holding back. They came at me with the full force of warriors who had trained for centuries, and suddenly my small victory felt like delaying the inevitable. I parried one blade, dodged the other, gave ground toward the window they'd broken through. The room's layout worked against me. Too much open space, nowhere to create choke points or force them to come at me one at a time. They'd chosen their entry point well, probably studied the suite's design before attacking. Steel rang against steel. I blocked, countered, desperately tried to remember training that felt inadequate against opponents who moved like liquid death. One blade got through my guard, slicing a line across my ribs that burned like fire. Another cut opened my shoulder. They were herding me toward the broken window, toward a fall that would look like an accident. A tragic misstep by a human who couldn't handle Zarathi architecture. The lead assassin recovered, joining his companions despite his injured shoulder. 3 again. I was bleeding, tiring, running out of room and options. They knew it. I could see it in how they moved. Patient now, content to let exhaustion do their work for them. Last chance. the lead assassin said. Yield. You fought well enough to earn mercy. I thought about yielding, about stepping back from this insanity and returning to a life where my biggest concern was translating diplomatic correspondence, about survival and safety and all the reasonable choices I'd abandoned when I took Thessara's hand. Then I thought about my brother's ship exploding, about colonies burning, about a queen who had gambled her throne on hope that someone, somewhere, might prove that the gap between species could be bridged, about a moment in a throne room when I'd chosen to answer a question I didn't fully understand. No, I said, and attacked. They weren't expecting it. Wounded prey was supposed to retreat, not charge. I put everything into a series of strikes that would have made my instructors weep. Too aggressive, too desperate, burning through energy I couldn't afford to waste. But desperation had its own kind of power. For 3 seconds I drove them back through sheer audacity. Then my foot slipped in my own blood. The lead assassin's blade came around in an arc I couldn't avoid. I twisted, tried to roll with it, felt the weapon bite deep into my side. Pain exploded through my nervous system. I went down hard, my own blade skittering across the floor beyond reach. The assassin stood over me, weapons raised for killing strikes. I'd failed. Failed Thessara, failed Earth, failed to survive long enough to even reach the second trial. Some king consort I'd turned out to be. Some symbol of hope. Just another human who'd reached beyond his limits and found them very real. The door exploded inward. Thessara filled the entrance, her scales blazing combat red, her personal guard flooding in behind her. She held a weapon I'd only seen in historical archives, a plasma lance that hummed with barely contained energy, the signature weapon of Zarathi royalty when they chose to fight personally instead of commanding from safety. "You dare," she said, and her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of absolute authority. "You dare attack one under my direct protection. You dare enter the royal wing carrying weapons. You dare threaten what is mine." The assassins froze. For half a second I thought they might surrender. Then the lead assassin made a decision that sealed all their fates. He lunged toward me, blade raised for a killing strike, betting that Thessara wouldn't risk hitting me with the plasma lance. He was wrong. The lance fired with a sound like reality tearing. The energy bolt passed within inches of my head, close enough that I felt my hair stand on end, and caught the assassin's center mass. "You didn't scream?" Didn't have time. The plasma reduced him to component atoms in an eye blink. The other 2 assassins broke for the window. Thessara's guards cut them down before they made 3 steps. Professional, efficient, absolute. Within 5 seconds of her arrival, all 3 assassins were dead or dying, and the queen was kneeling beside me, her hands pressing against the wound in my side. "Medic," she snapped. "Now. And someone tell me how assassins breach the royal wing, or heads will roll beyond metaphor." Her hands were gentle despite her fury, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. I tried to speak, to tell her I was fine, but my body had other ideas. Shock was setting in, making the room spin and sounds distort into strange echoes. "Stay with me," Thessara commanded, her face filling my vision. "Marcus Webb, you passed the proving fire. You do not get to die in your bedroom to cowards' blades. You survive. You heal. You face the trial of wisdom tomorrow. Do you understand? Tomorrow," I managed. "Wisdom." "Right. Easy." Her scales shifted through colors I couldn't track. "But you walked through fire and fought trained assassins with a day's preparation. You continue to surprise me, human." "Keep doing so. It is becoming a habit I appreciate." The medics arrived with equipment that looked like torture devices, but worked with startling efficiency. They sealed my wounds with something that felt like ice and fire simultaneously, pumped me full of stimulants that brought the world back into sharp focus, and muttered professional opinions about humans being surprisingly fragile for a species that produced warriors stupid enough to fight impossible odds. Thessara remained beside me through it all, her hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture that probably violated protocol but communicated more than words could. When the medics finished and declared I'd survive, she helped me to my feet personally. "The trial of wisdom begins in 8 hours, she said quietly. "Can you walk?" "I can walk." "Can you think clearly despite the pain medications?" "Clear enough." "Actually rest this time. I am posting my personal guard in this room. No one enters except them and the medics. If another assassin appears, I will consider it an act of war against the throne itself." Her eyes met mine, and I saw something beyond concern in them, something that looked like fear, quickly buried but unmistakably present. "Do not die, Marcus Webb. I did not gamble my throne on you only to lose the wager to blades in the dark. I'll do my best. She left, taking most of the guards with her, but leaving 4 of her personal detail arranged around the room like living statues. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me, just settled into positions that covered every angle of approach. The message was clear. If anyone else tried to kill me tonight, they'd have to go through warriors who had protected the Queen for decades. I collapsed onto the bed, every muscle screaming protest. The stimulants kept me conscious but did nothing for the bone-deep exhaustion that came from walking through fire, fighting assassins, and bleeding all over priceless palace floors. 8 hours until the trial of wisdom. 8 hours to heal enough to think clearly when my life depended on solving whatever impossible puzzle they'd designed. I closed my eyes and tried to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling back to the assassins, to how close I'd come to dying, to the reality that powerful forces within the Zarathi Empire wanted me gone badly enough to risk the Queen's wrath. Passing the trials wouldn't be enough. I'd have to survive long enough to actually reach them. And somewhere in the palace, nobles who'd sent the first assassination attempt were probably already planning the second. The throne room politics that I'd studied academically were now actively trying to kill me.
Wonderful.
The hours crawled past. The guards remained motionless. My wounds throbbed despite the medicine. And slowly, inexorably, dawn approached, bringing with it the trial of wisdom and whatever fresh hell the Zarathi had designed to test whether a human could think like royalty. When the morning drums finally sounded, I rose from the bed feeling like I'd been hit by a shuttle. The guards escorted me through corridors filled with Zarathi nobles who watched with calculating eyes, measuring my worth, assessing my chances, probably placing bets on how spectacularly I'd fail. The trial of wisdom took place in a chamber I'd never seen before. A circular room with walls covered in screens showing star systems, tactical displays, resource allocation charts, and 1,000 other data streams that painted a picture of an empire stretching across galaxies. At the center sat a command throne connected to systems I didn't recognize. The High Priestess waited beside Thessera, who wore the formal robes of judgment rather than combat armor. Neither smiled. Neither offered encouragement. This was ritual, tradition, the weight of culture pressing down to see if I'd crack. The trial of wisdom tests the mind of Marcus Webb, the High Priestess intoned. Command the throne. Make the choice no ruler wishes to face, show wisdom or show failure. There are no other outcomes. I approached the throne cautiously. The moment I sat, restraints clicked into place around my wrists and head, not painful but absolutely secure. Panic flared before I controlled it. This was the test. Whatever came next, I couldn't run, couldn't fight, could only think and choose. The screens blazed to life with a scenario that made my blood freeze. A Kryn fleet attacking 2 Zarathi colonies simultaneously. Both called for reinforcements. Both faced extinction without help. But the Empire's nearest military force could only reach one in time. The other would fall, its billions of inhabitants slaughtered, before backup arrived. Choose, the High Priestess said. Which world receives aid? Which world dies? You have 60 seconds to decide, and you must justify your choice. I stared at the data, mind racing. Colony Alpha held 15 billion Zarathi, mostly civilians, but also the Empire's largest manufacturing base for military equipment. Colony Beta held 8 billion, mostly research centers and cultural archives irreplaceable in value. Losing Alpha crippled future military production. Losing Beta erased knowledge accumulated over 10,000 years. Numbers scrolled past. Tactical assessments. Economic projections, cultural significance ratings, every metric designed to make the choice impossible, to show that sometimes leadership meant accepting losses too terrible to contemplate and living with the consequences. 40 seconds. I could save more lives by choosing Alpha, but Beta's knowledge might prevent future conflicts that would cost billions more. The war with the Kryn had dragged on for centuries, partly because lost tactical data forced commanders to relearn lessons at horrific cost. 20 seconds. My hands clenched against the restraints. This wasn't a test of knowing the right answer. It was a test of making a choice when no right answer existed, of understanding that rulers lived with impossible decisions, that the throne demanded sacrifices that would haunt you forever. 10 seconds. I thought of my brother dying because Earth's fleet lacked the tactical data to counter Kryn weapons. Thought of knowledge lost, meaning death multiplied across generations. Thought of Thessera ruling for 3 centuries, making these choices alone, bearing the weight of every world lost to her decisions. Beta, I said. Send the fleet to Beta. Because we can rebuild factories, we can manufacture new equipment, retrain workers, reconstruct supply chains. It will take decades, but it's possible. My voice came out steady despite the horror of what I'd just done. But if we lose Beta's archives, we lose knowledge that took millennia to acquire. We lose tactical data that could prevent future Alphases from falling. We lose cultural heritage that defines what we're fighting to preserve, and we condemn future generations to repeating mistakes we'd learn to avoid.
The screens shifted, showing the consequences. Alpha's shields failing.
Cities burning, billions dying while I sat locked in a throne, watching my choice play out in simulated agony. The Kryn ships carved through defenses designed for a different enemy, exploiting weaknesses that anyone with access to Beta's tactical archives would have recognized and countered. 15 billion dead, the High Priestess said flatly. Because you chose data over lives. Defend this decision. I can't. The words hurt to speak. 15 billion people died because I chose to save 8 billion in some archives. There's no defense that makes that acceptable. No justification that makes the math work out to anything but catastrophic loss. I met her eyes, refusing to look away from the judgment I saw there. But leadership isn't about making good choices. It's about making necessary ones. And sometimes necessary means living with failures too large to forgive yourself for committing. The simulation froze. The restraints released. I sat in the throne, shaking, watching the frozen image of cities I'd condemned burning on a dozen screens. The High Priestess studied me with an expression I couldn't read. You chose knowledge over lives, she said. Many would call this cowardice. They would say a true leader values every individual life above abstract data. They'd be right to call it cowardice. I forced myself to stand, to face her, despite the weight pressing down on my shoulders. But cowardice that serves the future is still service. And leadership that only considers immediate consequences is leadership that fails its people in the long term. Thesara rose from her observation position, her scales neutral gray that could shift to approval or condemnation. You sacrificed billions to preserve knowledge. You accepted a loss that will haunt you. You defended a choice you called indefensible. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. And you did so knowing that the entire Empire watched. Knowing that this test would reveal how you think, what you value, how you approach impossible decisions, why did you choose honestly instead of choosing what you thought we wanted to hear? For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Thessara's scales shifted to gold, the color of approval earned through demonstrated worth rather than given freely. The trial of wisdom is complete. Marcus Webb has chosen with his mind open and his conscience engaged. He has shown that he understands leadership's burden. He has proven wisdom exists in accepting impossibility rather than denying it. The clicking approval started again, spreading through the nobles who'd gathered to witness this trial. Not everyone joined in. I saw scales flash combat red on several observers, saw the calculation in their eyes as they marked me as a threat that needed eliminating. But enough approved. Enough recognized that I'd passed another test. 2 down. 1 to go. The trial of strength awaited tomorrow, and according to Thessara, the noble champion selected to face me had killed 47 opponents. I'd barely survived 3 assassins. The math didn't look promising, but I'd walked through fire and made choices that would haunt me forever. I could face one more trial, one more test, one more chance to prove that sometimes the right path forward was the one that terrified you most. Thessara took my arm, guiding me from the chamber while guards formed up around us. You surprised them again, she murmured. They expected you to choose the larger population, to make the safe, defendable choice. Instead, you chose the harder path and owned the consequences without excuse. That is more royal than most born to thrones ever manage. I condemn billions, in a simulation designed to force exactly that choice. But you understood the test's purpose. Not to find the right answer, but to demonstrate you could make terrible decisions and live with them, that you wouldn't break under the weight of impossible responsibility. Her grip on my arm tightened. Tomorrow you face Krothnok, our greatest living warrior. He will try to kill you. Not in simulation, not in metaphor. He will break your bones and spill your blood on sacred sand, and he will do so with the Empire's blessing because that is how the trial of strength works. Can you survive that? Probably not. Then why continue? Because you chose to believe a human could stand beside you. Because somewhere out there, my brother died hoping his sacrifice would matter. And because every time I think about quitting, I remember that fire reading my soul and finding me worthy of something I'd never dared believe I could become. Marcus Webb, You are either the bravest person I have ever met or the most foolish. I have not decided which, but I am glad you did not withdraw. Glad you continue forward. Glad that for the first time in 3 centuries, I am not facing the Empire's challenges alone. You have already proven that humans can walk our fire and survive our wisdom trials. You have shown the Empire that outsiders can master what we thought only we understood. Win or lose tomorrow, you have changed how we see your species. That is no small thing. The guards escorted us back to my quarters. Repaired now, the broken window replaced, all evidence of assassination scrubbed away. Thesara dismissed everyone except her personal guard detail, then stood with me in the center of the room, where I'd nearly died hours earlier. I should not do this, she said quietly. But protocols have already been bent beyond recognition, and tomorrow you may die, so I will say what would normally wait until after the trials conclude. She reached out, taking my hand in hers the way she had in the throne room days ago. I chose to offer you my hand because I believed humans could bridge the gap between our peoples, but I am beginning to realize I chose you specifically because something in you called to something in me. A recognition that neither of us should face our burdens alone. A hope that perhaps we could find strength in each other. Thesara. Let me finish. Her scales shifted through colors too fast to track. If you survive tomorrow, when we bond, it will not simply be political alliance or strategic necessity. It will be a choice I make freely, knowing what you have proven yourself to be. And if you die tomorrow, I will honor your sacrifice by ensuring the alliance you died to forge continues. Your species will have the Zarathi Empire's full support against the Kryn, because you showed me that courage exists beyond our borders. She released my hand, stepping back before I could respond. Rest, Marcus Webb. Heal as much as your body allows. Tomorrow's trial begins at noon. The arena will be larger, the crowd will be greater, and Krathnak will show no mercy. But if you fight with the same commitment you showed walking the fire, you have a chance. Small but real. She left before I could find words, taking her guards with her and leaving me alone with my thoughts and the medical team that arrived moments later to check my healing wounds. They worked in silence, replacing bandages, administering more medication, muttering professional concerns about humans attempting the Zarathi trials. When they finally left, I stood at the new window, staring out at the city that sprawled beneath the palace. 3 moons hung in the sky, painting everything in shades of silver and blue. Somewhere out there, billions of Zarathi waited to see if a human would survive tomorrow. Waited to see if the bridge Thesara had tried to build would hold or collapse under the weight of tradition and violence. I touched my side where the assassin's blade had carved deep. The wound had sealed but would take days to fully heal. Days I didn't have. Tomorrow I'd face a warrior who'd killed 47 opponents in formal combat, and I'd do it with injuries that would slow me down, and pain that would distract at critical moments. The smart choice was to withdraw, to accept that I'd done enough, proven enough, changed enough minds. To take the honorable exit, Thesara would undoubtedly grant me, but I'd made my choice in a throne room when I accepted her hand. Made it again walking through fire. Made it again condemning 15 billion simulated lives to save knowledge that might prevent real deaths. Each time the choice appeared, I'd chosen the harder path. Tomorrow would be no different. I slept badly, haunted by dreams of blue fire and burning cities and the lead assassin's blade arcing toward my chest. When morning came, I rose despite exhaustion and went through combat drills my instructors had taught me, testing my body's limits, finding where pain would slow me and adjusting my movements to compensate. The guards brought breakfast, but I barely ate. My stomach twisted with anticipation and fear. Hours crawled past. Medics checked my wounds again, declared them healing adequately, warned me that strenuous activity would likely tear the seals and leave me bleeding. I thanked them and continued preparing anyway. At noon precisely, the drums began. The guards arrived to escort me, their scales showing approval colors now instead of neutral assessment. I'd earned some measure of respect at least from these warriors who had watched me survive assassination and trials. Whether that respect would matter when Krathnak started trying to kill me remained to be seen. The arena was massive, easily triple the size of where I'd faced the proving fire. 50,000 Zarathi filled the stands, creating a wall of sound that shook the ground. At the center, a circular combat pit waited, its sand stained dark from centuries of blood. Ancient weapons hung on the walls. Ceremonial blades, energy lances, nets with barbed edges. The tools of a trial designed to test strength in all its forms. Thesara sat on her throne, wearing full ceremonial armor that gleamed like starlight. The noble council flanked her. their expressions ranging from anticipation to barely concealed satisfaction. They expected me to die here. Expected the human upstart to be broken on their champion's blade, proving once and for all that outsiders didn't belong anywhere near the throne. The High Priestess rose as I entered the arena. The trial of strength tests the body and will of Marcus Webb, human who would claim the title of King Consort. Let him face our greatest warrior. Let him prove his physical worth or let him fall. The trial begins when both combatants enter the pit. It ends when one yields or dies. There are no other outcomes. Krathnak entered from the opposite side, and my heart sank. While he stood 9 feet tall, heavily muscled even by Zarathi standards, his scales decorated with kill marks that covered his arms and chest. He carried a traditional blade similar to mine, but sized for his massive frame, and he moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. He crossed the arena to stand before Thessera's throne, bowing deeply. Matriarch, I am honored to serve. This human has done well to reach this trial, but he cannot survive what comes next. I will make his death swift and honorable, as befits one who has shown courage. Fight with honor, Thessara replied, her voice carrying across the arena. But remember that victory matters less than demonstration of worth. The trial tests strength, not simply killing ability. Krathnak's mandibles clicked, the Zarathi equivalent of a dismissive laugh. With respect, Matriarch, he is human. Small, fragile, injured from last night's assassination attempt. He will break quickly. There is no shame in acknowledging physical limitations. He turned and walked to the pit's edge, dropping in smoothly. I followed, trying not to think about the size difference, the experience gap, the very real possibility that I was about to die in front of 50,000 witnesses and an alien queen who'd gambled her throne on me. The pit's sand was soft under my feet, treacherous footing that would slow reaction time and punish poor balance. The walls were smooth crystal, offering no handholds, no escape. Just 2 fighters and a question of who would still be standing when the drums stopped. The High Priestess raised her hand. The trial of strength begins now. Fight until one yields or dies. The Empire watches. Show us truth. Her hand dropped. The drums thundered. Krathnak attacked. He moved faster than anything his size should move, closing the distance in 2 strides. His blade came around in an arc designed to bisect me. I rolled under it, came up behind him, struck at his knee joint, and barely scratched his armor. He turned, backhanded me with enough force to send me flying into the pit wall. Stars exploded across my vision. I tasted blood. My ribs screamed where the wound from last night tore partially open. And Krathnak was already coming again, relentless, overwhelming, exactly as deadly as advertised. I barely got my blade up in time to deflect his next strike. The impact numbed my arms. He pressed forward, raining blows that I blocked or dodged more through desperation than skill. He was too strong, too fast, too experienced. Everything I tried, he countered. Every opening I saw was bait to trap me in worse positions. He drove me back across the pit, his blade finding gaps in my defense, cutting shallow wounds across my arms and shoulders. Death by 1,000 cuts. He was testing me, measuring my limits, probably trying to understand how I had survived the previous trials because nothing I showed him now suggested I deserved to be here. Yield, he said during a momentary separation. You have fought bravely, human. No shame exists in acknowledging superior strength. Yield in live. I wanted to. Every rational part of my mind screamed that this was hopeless, that I was outmatched in every category that mattered. That survival meant surrender, and surrender was right there, offered freely. The smart choice that would let me walk away with honor intact. Then I looked up at Thessera, saw her sitting absolutely still on her throne, her scales showing nothing, revealing nothing, but her eyes met mine across the distance, and I saw what she couldn't say aloud. That she'd gambled everything on me. That if I yielded now, the nobles would use it as proof that humans couldn't match Zarathi's strength, that the alliance was built on weakness, that I should never have been allowed near the throne. I thought about my brother's last transmission, about making his death mean something, about choices made in throne rooms and fires and trials that had brought me to this moment. No, I said, and attacked. Not with technique, not with strategy. With pure desperate aggression born of knowing I had nothing left to lose. I threw myself at Krathnak like a missile, abandoning defense completely, gambling everything on overwhelming his expectations. It almost worked. For 3 seconds he gave ground, surprised by the ferocity of my assault. Then his combat experience took over. He sidestepped, let my momentum carry me past, and slammed his blade's pommel into my kidney with surgical precision. I went down hard, pain exploding through my entire nervous system. My blade fell from nerveless fingers. Krafnak stood over me, his weapon raised for a killing blow, and I knew I'd failed. Failed Thessera, failed Earth, failed to be anything more than a stubborn human who'd reached too far and fallen short. You fought well, Krafnak said, and I heard genuine respect in his voice. Few survive even this long against me. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Yield now, before I must kill you. I lay in the sand, bleeding, defeated, every muscle screaming. The smart choice, the rational choice, the choice that would let me survive was right there. Just say the word, just yield. Just accept that some gaps couldn't be bridged, some differences couldn't be overcome, some trials were designed to be failed. But then I remembered something. Something Thessera had said days ago when she'd first explained the trials. The trial of strength tests the body and will. Not just physical power. Not just combat skill. Will. The ability to keep moving forward when forward seemed impossible. I'd walked through fire when my fear screamed to run. I'd made impossible choices when no good options existed. I'd fought assassins with inadequate training and survived through sheer refusal to die quietly. Each time I'd found a way through, not because I was strong enough, but because I was too stubborn to quit. Strength wasn't just muscle and speed. It was the decision to stand up when staying down made more sense, to try again when trying seemed futile, to believe that somehow, some way you could find an answer that everyone else thought didn't exist. I grabbed a handful of sand and threw it in Krafnak's eyes.
He wasn't expecting it. Why would...
It violated every principle of honorable combat. It was cheap, desperate, exactly the kind of trick a human would use when outmatched. His blade wavered as he blinked, trying to clear his vision, and I had maybe 2 seconds of advantage. I didn't waste them. I rolled between his legs, grabbed my fallen blade, and came up behind him. My injured side screamed protest, but I ignored it, driving the blade toward the weak point in his armor, at the base of his spine. Another target I'd memorized from cultural studies, never thinking I'd need it. Krafnak spun incredibly fast despite his blindness and deflected my strike. But he was off balance now, uncertain, forced to fight defensively against an opponent he'd dismissed as finished. I pressed the advantage, striking at joints and gaps in his armor, using speed and flexibility he couldn't match, fighting dirty and desperate and with absolutely no shame about either. Clever, he admitted, his vision clearing. You use your advantages instead of trying to match mine. But clever is not enough against experience. He was right. The moment his vision cleared, he'd win. He was already adapting to my tactics, learning my patterns. I had seconds before he regained full control and ended this decisively. So I changed the pattern. Dropped my blade entirely and threw myself at him in a tackle, using my lower center of gravity to try to take him off his feet. It was insane. It was desperate. It was exactly what no one expected. We went down together in a tangle of limbs. His blade skittered away across the sand. Mine lay forgotten meters distant. Suddenly this wasn't a weapons fight anymore. It was wrestling, grappling, 2 beings locked together trying to find submission holds or kill strikes without the tools they'd trained with. And here, finally, my size became an advantage. I was smaller, more flexible, able to slip out of holds that would have trapped a larger opponent. I wrapped around Krafnak like a snake, going for chokeholds and pressure points, using every dirty trick military instructors had taught me about fighting opponents with superior strength. He threw me off twice, each time I came back. Each time I found a new angle, a new vulnerability, some small advantage I could press. The crowd's roar became deafening, half-clicking approval, half hisses of outrage at my complete abandonment of combat honor. We rolled across the sand, locked together, neither able to gain decisive advantage. My wounds opened completely now, leaving me slick with blood. His scales bore scratches where I'd clawed at weak points. We were both exhausted, both running on will alone. "You will not win," he gasped. "Even if you kill me, you are too injured to stand." "Then we'll both lie here," I shot back, tightening my grip around his throat. "The trial doesn't end until one yields or dies. If you won't do either, we stay locked here until your matriarch decides what that means." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Krafnak's face. He'd fought 47 opponents. Killed them all. None had ever considered forcing a stalemate. None had been crazy enough to accept mutual defeat rather than honorable loss. The drums stopped. The arena fell silent. The High Priestess rose, her expression unreadable. Combatants. The trial of strength has revealed its truth. Release each other and rise. We separated slowly, both of us barely able to move. I got to my feet through sheer will, swaying, vision darkening at the edges. Krathnak stood with more dignity, but I saw the respect in his eyes now. The recognition that I'd done something none of his previous opponents had managed. I'd survived. The High Priestess surveyed the pit, the blood-stained sand, the two fighters who'd pushed each other to absolute limits. The trial of strength tests not merely combat ability, but the will to continue, and continuation seems impossible. Marcus Webb did not win, but neither did he yield. He fought with every tool available, honorably and otherwise, refusing defeat until no strength remained. This demonstrates understanding that strength manifests in many forms. The trial is complete. Marcus Webb has passed. The arena erupted. Approval clicks, outraged hisses, the sound of an empire divided over what they'd just witnessed. I swayed on my feet, barely conscious, watching Thesara rise from her throne. Her scales blazed pure gold now, and something in her expression made my breath catch despite the pain. She descended into the pit personally, crossing to stand before me. You did not fight with honor. You fought with everything you had. You showed my warriors that humans define strength differently, and that difference has value. You survived what should have killed you through stubbornness and creativity. Will that refused to break. She took my hand, the same gesture that had started everything days ago. Marcus Webb, you have passed all 3 trials. You have earned the right to stand beside me. Will you accept this bond, knowing what it demands? At the queen who had gambled everything on an impossible hope. At the empire watching to see if this fragile alliance would hold. At the future that depended on someone saying yes when no made more sense. I accept, I said for the second time, and this time I understood exactly what the question meant. Tessara's scales flashed brilliant gold, and she smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since we'd met. Then let the bonding ceremony begin. Let the Empire witness the joining of Queen and King Consort. Let humanity and the Zarathi stand together against the darkness that threatens us both. Supporting my weight as medics rushed into the pit, the crowd's reaction didn't matter anymore. The nobles' disapproval could wait. For this moment, I'd done what I'd set out to do. I'd survived the impossible. I'd proven that sometimes the bridge between species was built not on perfect understanding, but on the willingness to keep trying when trying seemed futile. I'd held an alien woman's hand. She'd asked if I would marry her. I'd said yes, and somehow, impossibly, I'd survived long enough to see that promise through. As medics carried me from the arena toward healing and the bonding ceremony that would follow, I caught Thesara's eye one last time. She walked beside me, her hand still in mine, and in her expression I saw the future we'd build together. Not easy, but possible. Real. Worth every impossible trial.